Okay, let's jump in. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really interesting topic. It's about navigating living and working overseas when, you know, your main reason for being there doesn't quite fit the usual visa boxes, managing those dual identities. Now, the material we're looking at focuses on folks involved in what it calls apostolic teams.
Right.
Their aim is reaching unreached people groups, sharing faith, that kind of thing. But even though that's the specific context here, the challenges they face, visas, public identity, well, that's relevant for lots of people doing cross-cultural work or anyone living abroad long-term for reasons beyond, say, a standard corporate job.
Yeah, and the source really digs into this idea of needing what it calls tent making or setting up residency platforms. Basically, it means having a job or a business or some role that people get, something society understands.
Okay. So a public role that lets you live there legally and fit in.
Exactly. And the source makes it clear this is distinct from, but necessary for, that underlying primary purpose they have.
So our mission today is really to pull this source apart, understand the why behind these roles, grapple with the ethics, look at the practical side, different types, the pros and cons.
And by the end of this, you should have a much clearer picture of this whole approach. Why the source sees it as, well, necessary and ethical. We'll pull out some key examples, too.
All right, so the source kicks off with the fundamental problem. It says flat out, very few countries, maybe none, offer a visa for someone whose main goal is, sharing their faith and starting faith communities.
Right.
Focusing just on that full time. The source says that's pretty rare these days in this specific kind of work.
And, well, that reality creates the necessity, doesn't it? If you can't get a visa for your core mission, what do? The source is clear. You need another role, a job, a business, maybe humanitarian work, something legitimate in the eyes of the government, and just as importantly, society.
That's the whole basis for this tent-making idea.
Exactly. That's the driver.
Okay, but this immediately brings up a big question, and the source hits it head on. Isn't this dual identity thing, isn't it a bit, deceptive? Is there an ethical issue?
It's a really important question. And the source answers with a very strong no, definitely not. It doesn't mince words, and it gives 4 reasons, calls them truths, to back that up. First one, normal life.
Okay.
It argues, look, it's totally normal for anyone, Christian or not, to have a job identity like I'm a teacher, I'm an engineer, and a deeper life purpose, maybe living out values or knowing and sharing their faith.
Right. Like if you ask a programmer what they do, they say, I'm a programmer.
Exactly. They don't usually lead with, my life's purpose is X, Y, Z, though that might come up later. The source just calls this being bivocational, 2 roles. Nothing inherently deceptive about it.
That distinction feels key. Having multiple facets, one being your public work. Okay, what's the second trick?
Second, they point to biblical precedent, specifically 1 Samuel 16.
The story where God sends Samuel to find a new king?
That's the one. Samuel's worried Saul will find out and, kill him.
Right.
So God tells him, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Now, the source emphasizes Samuel really was going to make that sacrifice. It wasn't a lie.
Okay, so it was a real secondary purpose.
Exactly. An additional legitimate reason given by God to navigate a dangerous situation while still achieving the main goal, anointing David.
Interesting take. Not deception, but using a real secondary purpose to enable the primary one safely. Okay, number 3.
Third, the source says these tent makers, through their jobs or businesses or NGOs, are actually providing valuable services. They're creating jobs sometimes, offering useful skills, meeting real community needs. It's framed as genuine service motivated by love.
Makes sense. And the 4th point.
The source is really firm on this. These vocations are real. They aren't just fake fronts. It says quite strongly that it can't think of any tent maker in this context who claims to teach English, for example, without actually doing it and doing it well.
So the job itself is legit.
Totally legit, a real contribution.
Okay, so summing up those 4 points. The argument is having a public role isn't deceptive if it's real, it's valuable, it's part of a normal bivocational life.
Yeah.
Even if your deepest purpose isn't the first thing you announce.
Right.
And the source really hammers home how important it is for the person themselves to be clear on this. Because that public role, that's the main lens people see you through initially.
Absolutely.
If you're vague or awkward about what do you do, well, that creates insecurity and actually undermines everything.
Yeah, being able to give a clear, confident answer to why are you here or what's your job, is huge. And this leads straight into the two big practical needs driving these roles, especially after, say, an initial language study visa runs out. First, like we just said, having that viable answer, something people understand. And second, simply getting the visa or residence permit, the legal right to stay long term.
And the source poses a really good question here for you, the listener. Which matters more, the viable identity or the residence permit? Because, as it points out, you might get one without the other. A permit for a job that keeps you totally isolated isn't very useful for connecting, right? And a great local identity doesn't help if you can't legally stay.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So what kinds of roles are we talking about? The source lists the main categories it sees people using for these residency platforms. You've got regular jobs, being an employee. Think teaching, IT, healthcare, business management, sales, lots of things. Then there's owning your own business. Being self-employed or maybe having partners. NGO work is another common one, humanitarian aid, community development projects. Sometimes, though it's pretty rare, according to the source, working in an official church capacity might be an option if there's a legally recognized church structure. Being a student is another route, usually post-grad or research, maybe long-term language study, or even sometimes just being on a tourist visa but having a clear stated purpose, like researching potential business ideas. And then there's a catch-all other category, maybe retirement visas or things like that. The source figures these cover like 95% of cases.
Wow, okay, that's quite a range. It sounds like choosing the right one could be kind of overwhelming. You need to think about your own background skills, what you like doing.
Definitely.
And crucially, what's actually needed or possible where you're going.
Exactly. And this brings us to what the source calls maybe the most vital question of all. What do you actually want this residency platform to do for your main purpose?
Okay.
Like, are you looking for something minimal, low commitment, just to get the visa and free up time for direct ministry? Or are you open to a more demanding role, maybe something time-consuming, if it opens up unique doors or has a bigger impact for your underlying goals, what the source calls the kingdom?
That really shifts the thinking, doesn't it? From just finding any role to finding a strategic one. And the source actually lists, believe it or not, 10 potential benefits these roles can bring. 10.
It's a pretty impressive list. Let's touch on a few key ones. First, providing excellent viability and identity. Like we said, being a teacher or engineer gives a much clearer social position than something vague. The source even suggests this might offer some stability in dealing with officials, though no guarantees. Second, obviously it provides the crucial residence permit. That's foundational. Third, generating contacts. Your work automatically connects you with colleagues, customers, suppliers, people you'd probably never meet otherwise. Fourth, it creates natural opportunities for witness, both in what you say and how you act, your work ethic, your integrity. Fifth, a sense of normalcy, having a routine, a place to go, sharing that common experience of work with local people. Sixth, it's a constant arena for language and culture learning. You're immersed, practicing every day in real situations. And seventh, demonstrating love by meeting felt needs, especially relevant for humanitarian work or social enterprises.
That point about meeting needs, it really hits home. And the source includes this really touching example. It talks about a handicap center that the local community started calling the Miracle Center, spontaneously.
Wow.
And gets specific stories: a girl who couldn't walk, now walking; a boy riding a tricycle, using arms that were previously immobile. But the most moving one is about a mother from a remote village. Her daughter couldn't move, couldn't even hold her head up.
Oh, wow.
A local therapist at the center taught the mom physical therapy exercises. Months later, the mom comes back. The girl is holding her head up, jumping, running.
That's incredible.
The mother called it a miracle from the center, told everyone in her village. She was even planning to sell livestock to rent an apartment nearby just to come more often. It just powerfully shows how that practical service, the therapy, became this profound demonstration of care.
Yeah, the platform itself, the center, created the space for that connection, that impact. It's a great illustration. But while the benefits are real, the source is also very realistic about the trade-offs.
Right. Nothing's perfect.
Exactly. No single role delivers all 10 benefits perfectly. And probably the biggest trade-off, the most common one, is just time.
Balancing the job with everything else.
Yeah, balancing the hours you put into your actual tent-making work with the time you need for, language learning, relationship building, evangelism, discipleship, all those core primary purpose activities. And the source makes a pretty candid observation here, based on what they've seen. People in really demanding full-time plus jobs Well, they often find it hard to make a huge direct contribution to things like starting new faith communities, compared to someone maybe with more flexibility.
That makes sense.
So it emphasizes that each person really needs to figure out what fits their specific situation and goals.
It's a definite balancing act.
Yeah.
And the source also points out, hey, you don't have to nail it perfectly on day one.
Right.
People often change roles. They learn, new opportunities pop up. It uses the Apostle Paul as an example.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Highly educated, respected background in Jewish law, right? But he chooses to work as a tent maker, making actual tents.
Which was seen as a much lower status job.
Exactly. But the source suggests Paul did it because it strategically fit his calling, traveling, supporting himself, sharing his message everywhere. So, new doors open.
Yeah.
You adapt.
And speaking of practicalities, the source gives some really specific advice, particularly for men in many cultural contexts. It notes that having work outside the home is often really important for just feeling normal and, crucially, for building relationships with local men. That can be harder if you're just working from home.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, and it says something as simple as having an office space, even a shared one, and having business cards. It can make a huge psychological difference in how you're perceived.
Right.
And they're just really effective tools for making connections, much more so than just operating out of your apartment.
So, bringing it all together,
Yeah.
the source kind of circles back to the core idea. The call is fundamentally about living and working among people, for Christ's sake, being representatives of God's love and truth through your actual life and work.
And, again, to be super clear, the source absolutely argues against any kind of deceptive practice. The whole point is adopting vocations that are real, legitimate, valuable.
Doing good work.
Exactly. Whether it's business or teaching or healthcare. The idea is to show care, meet needs, do excellent work. That itself makes sense to people, the source argues, and it gives credibility to the deeper message. It wraps up with that verse from Colossians, whatever you do, do your work heartily, as for the Lord rather than for men. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve.
Okay, so the main takeaway from this deep dive, tent making, these residency platforms.
Yeah.
As this source presents them, they aren't some sneaky workaround.
No.
They're framed as a legitimate, strategic, even ethical necessity, driven by real-world stuff like visas and needing an identity people understand. And done right, they actually bring a lot of benefits to the table for cross-cultural work.
Yeah, these roles give you a real anchor in the community, an identity that makes sense locally. And they provide this built-in platform for relationships, for showing you care, even while you're pursuing that deeper purpose that maybe isn't on your business card or visa application.
And maybe here's a final thought to chew on, sparked by this source. Consider that sometimes, maybe taking on a role that seems, I don't know, less prestigious or different from what you were trained for back home. Maybe that could actually be the most effective, the most strategic path to reaching your highest goals and really connecting authentically in a new place. What could that principle look like in other parts of your life or work, even outside this specific context? Something to think about.